Welcome to the city's latest skills lab, Speed Dating with AI. Um, it's a wild new world out there. It's full of promise and hope and mysterious strangers who may change our lives forever. And you always wonder, have I met the right one? And am I just going to play the field, or maybe I'm just experimenting? Of course, I'm talking about chatbots. So what we want to do today is really explore chatbots a bit. The purpose of this particular skills lab, it's really structured for folks who may have already had experience working with some of these chatbots, ChatGPT being the one that we probably all know the most, at least by name. But an opportunity for, if you have not had experience with that, to come in and using the idea of speed dating, we'll do some exercises over the course of the next hour, hour and a half, to give you some exposure to these different chatbots and what I hope will be kind of a fun format for you. Because they're often the entry point for new generative AI users, we're really focusing on chatbots with a focus on research for this session. And although there are AIs out there that can do imagery and sound and slides and more, we may not be going into much depth with that at all in those particular areas. So to begin with, your speed dating hosts are Emily Rush, instructional designer with City, Laura Smith, instructional designer with City, and myself, Daniel Martin. So our objectives for today: by the end of the workshop, you will be able to experiment with leading generative AI systems. You'll be able to identify capabilities and limitations of different generative AI tools. And that'll again be through the process of using your own prompts and working with those tools and seeing the different results that you're going to be getting. How to craft effective prompts, which is kind of the secret weapon, the most important thing at this stage with working with generative AI. Generate ideas for integrating generative AI into teaching and research, which is where, let's say, it's kind of like the rubber hitting the road, so to speak. And then finally, we'll be discussing ethical implications of generative AI use cases in higher education.
Yeah, so why don't we go ahead and jump right in, introduce you to our first eligible bachelor here, Claude. So we're going to jump right into where we've titled them rounds. So this is our first round of speed dating with AI, dubbed Testing the Waters. So you're probably very familiar, as some of you have remarked, with ChatGPT, as early on it became very much synonymous with generative AI, right? So in this session, as we've been talking about, we're going to experiment or play with other tools. And one that I think a lot of us have enjoyed playing with, though like any other, it has its limitations and benefits, is Claude AI. And you see him here on the right. So Claude is a generative AI tool made by Anthropic. It's been recently enhanced, so it has fewer hallucinations, or what my husband would call make-em-ups, right? And the basic version is free, and it's based on written prompts. You can also upload documents to get responses. So what you're going to do here first is to log into Claude AI. If someone wouldn't mind dropping that link in the chat. If you've never logged into Claude AI, it's fairly easy to sign up. You do so with your email, and then you are sent an activation code in your email, and then that takes you directly to that interface. So I'll just give you guys a second, and if you want to just give me a thumbs up when I know that when you're in there, so that I know you're ready to continue, that would be great. All right, is everyone in Claude? If not, let me know. Or thumbs down if you're not. Okay, great. So a wonderful way to get started with some of these tools, and for the purposes of comparing responses, is to begin by entering a question or a request on a topic that you know well, so that you are able to evaluate the quality of the response. So that could be on really any topic you like. It may be research focused. It may be, how to bake a pineapple upside down cake or something like that, but something that you know really well and would be able to evaluate the accuracy of the response. So with that said, I'm actually going to go over into Claude. You see my recent engagement with Claude, including my highs this morning, because it wasn't working for me. And that's sometimes the case with these tools when they get overwhelmed, right? They either don't work or there's a delay. So hopefully that won't be the case for us today. So I'm just going to, well, I'll just actually go back to the prompt that I did for the purposes of this workshop. So I began by entering, which you can put in the message box for messaging Claude, what is backwards design in instructional design? So you might, that's a topic I know quite a bit about. So you would do something similar. It could be a question, it could be a request, it could be a statement. So go ahead and do that. If you need any assistance, let us know. As you're doing that, we've also, if someone wouldn't mind dropping that link into the chat, we've also created this spreadsheet, which you are free to use. You don't have to, in order to track and compare your outputs. So this may be something you, or approach you might model for your students if you're having them enter a prompt on a topic they know a lot about for the purpose of comparing outputs. They can also enter their prompts on a spreadsheet and evaluate, as you can also evaluate the quality of those responses. So feel free to populate that once you have a reply to your question, and then we'll talk about it. Or if you have any questions, please feel free to jump in and ask in the chat or either verbally. Okay. So very briefly, because for the sake of time, does anyone have any thoughts about how well Claude responded to your initial query? I'm sorry, I'm continuing to having my Zoom just crashed again, and I just got back on, so I don't know what's going on. I'll try to share my screen again, but if it continues to happen, I may look to Emily or Daniel to pick that up. Okay. All right, thank you guys so much. So we'll continue expanding upon that. So you may want to keep Claude open as we continue in case you want to go back to it. Daniel, do you want to pick up here?
Okay, thank you. This is just a little sidebar, if you will, but I just want to talk to you about just terms that you're going to see coming up a bit in regards to generative AI and chatbots. And you may well have already heard of some of these or be familiar with some of them, but to start off with is generative AI. And it's a type of artificial intelligence that can generate new original content, as it says here, using techniques such as neural networks to access very large data sets in order to produce contextually relevant responses to the prompts. Okay, as you go a little bit deeper here, that'll make some more sense as well. Now, machine learning is stated here as a branch of AI in which a machine is able to imitate intelligent human behavior. And in this sense, intelligent human behavior is represented by algorithms which are designed to improve the ability over time to analyze data and experiences, which is pretty much what learning is. Over time, the ability to develop understanding through experiences and information coming in. This process, though, of learning, it's iterative with new information or experiences serving to enhance that system's ability to recognize and patterns and start to make predictions. And these systems can adapt and evolve with varying degrees of human intervention being required. And really that depends on the tasks that these systems have been designed for, being trained for. And this brings us into large language models, LLM. They're a subfield of machine learning as well, and all of this is. And as you can tell from the name, they're designed specifically to analyze massive data sets of human language in order to identify patterns and relationships between words and concepts. And because of this, large language LLM algorithms can apply, and I really like this term, is contextual nuance when they're generating new content in response to prompts. And a really basic and maybe even by today's standards, almost primitive example of that is when you think of predictive text. And obviously, your computer doesn't necessarily know what you're talking about, or your phone when you're texting, but it is seeing the relationships of words that are being produced, and it's starting to say, well, typically, I'll just throw this out as a certain percentage of time when this particular sequence of words is used, it's succeeded by these other words. This is how the expression is completed. So that's an example of predictive text, which is kind of along the lines that we're talking about here. Now, natural language processing, um, I'll be a little bit geeky here, but say it involves the development of algorithms and models to extract meaning, context, and insight from written or spoken language. And again, this is very much back to what we've talked about previously. It allows for activities such as language translation, um, analysis of a feeling or a sentiment expressed in chatbot interactions. And the important thing to know about all of this is that we're not necessarily talking about machines understanding um, so much as they're being able to really look at words in these large data sets and be able to start because of what they've seen in the past, if you will, to start to be able to say how they imagine these relationships would work moving on into the future. And this is where prompt design becomes really critical as well, because given the nuance that you can provide to the system when you're generating your prompts, that system is able to start to make subtle uh, differences. Subtle, I'm going to say understanding, although that's not really quite the word to use here, to be able to apply those changes to what it thinks the response to what you're saying should be. And by response to what you're saying, it's response to the sequence of words in which you are providing it. And then finding what the sequence of words, if you will, that would respond to that might be.
All right, so I'm going to very briefly talk about some of the impacts of these AI tools and systems that were by no means designed for educational purposes, but as we all know in this session today, that they are having a significant impact on education at all levels. So very briefly, we know that AI can be used for all sorts of purposes, like generating text, creating images, summarizing articles, and a lot more. And I think one thing that I hope that we'll all take away from this session today is that the AI technology that we saw in March is the worst it's ever going to be. Since March, if you've been experimenting, you've already probably seen large gains in terms of capability, accuracy, things like that. In addition, we also want to keep in mind that a lot of institutions, although not necessarily rushed, that there's a lot of evidence that students are using AI far more than faculty. So that's something we really want to keep in mind. So all of these things mean that we need to sort of reflect on previous educational practices, and we may need to reconsider if those practices are still as effective today as they were pre-AI. Other thing I just always want to get in there is when we're thinking about how to respond to AI, we want to make sure that we don't turn to AI detection as a primary means of responding to this new technology. On a very kind of like basic level, it's unreliable. There's, I would say, an unacceptable level of false positives, and it can also be discriminatory to non-native English speakers. But there are some positive things. We already have even faculty in this session, who have shown that when it's used judiciously, it can really enhance learning. And I'll really briefly just go through a study that came out. It was so what I'd like to do now, and I'll keep it really brief so we can get back to the fun interactive part of this workshop, is just to talk a little bit more about some of the impacts of AI. And what you're seeing is one part of a survey from the Titan report, which we do want to keep in mind it was co-sponsored by Turnitin, so make of that what you will. The Titan report was initially, this survey was offered to faculty and students in spring and then offered again in fall. It was published in mid-October of this year. And just a couple of highlights. Initially, or actually, we see consistently that students at most institutions seem to be using AI at higher levels than faculty. But we're seeing a subtle shift from spring 23 to fall 23, especially in terms of faculty usage, but it's also marked by a big jump in student usage. So, and this slide, this question asked faculty and students about the perceived impact of generative AI writing tools on student learning. All right, so a couple of things that stand out to me in terms of this slide is that overall students are a lot more positive about the impact of generative AI writing tools in terms of learning than students, which is perhaps not surprising given that students are also using it at higher levels. Some of the things that I think are noteworthy about this report, though, is that over time, what is interesting is that the students are becoming less positive about the impact of AI, and some students are even becoming more negative about it. So as students are maybe recognizing what some of the capabilities are, their attitudes are shifting. At the same time, from spring 23 to fall 23, faculty seem to be viewing AI less negatively, which is striking. All right, so the last slide, and this is the thing that I personally found the most striking, the most surprising from this report, is the difference between faculty attitudes about AI in general and their belief about whether these tools will have an impact for work. And I think what we're seeing according to some of these surveys is that faculty may not want students to use generative AI tools in their courses right now, and that's understandable. But even non-users of AI seem to strongly believe that AI will impact students in professional settings, and faculty AI users even more strongly believe that most students will need to use AI in professional settings. Right. So those are just some key highlights. I'd like to just sum it up really quickly and say a few points, and then we'll move on to the fun part. So what I think this survey shows, and I should note that the entire survey will be in the resources at the end if you'd like to delve into this more. I think it shows that there are a lot of perceptible shifts in attitudes about generative AI from spring to fall, both from students and faculty. But I think what's really important to notice is there's still a strong gap between student and faculty perceptions about generative AI use and how it's acceptable. The fact that I think students are using it more than faculty, that doesn't mean in any way that faculty need to use AI in their courses. But what I think it does is it invites us all to think about how we can have inclusive conversations about different perspectives regarding AI. And I have to put in a plug naturally. A good starting point, I think, for this is to look at the AI literacy module, which is also linked in the resources for this workshop. And that was my very quick summary.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily and Daniel. So we're going to jump back into our speed round, or our speed dating rounds. So now that you've become somewhat familiar with one other generative AI tool, that of Claude, and learned more about sort of recent trends and attitudes around generative AI use, we're going to continue with our speed dating format and get to know other AI tools, and there are lots of them out there. So as Daniel mentioned, we're going to look specifically at sort of chat-based and research-focused generative AI tools for the purposes of this session. So why we're playing the field, it's really, and looking at other tools, it's really important to be able to verify the quality of the information you're getting from these tools in order to use them appropriately. So entering the same prompt in different tools will enable us to do this by comparing responses and evaluating those responses. And as experts in your field, entering a prompt on a topic you know well, you should be able to do this. You should be able to do this very well after having experimented with this new tool. So this is useful for both your professional work and, of course, for student learning. And it can be adapted to any kind of learning activity you might conduct with your students. So I realize this is a very text-heavy slide, and I apologize for that. Do not feel like this goes against everything I stand for in terms of good slide design. So I'm sorry, but I wanted to provide you with some information on these various tools, because what you're going to be doing is selecting one of these tools from this list. And Emily or Daniel are going to drop in the chat links to all of, I hope if you guys don't mind, all of these tools. They are Bing, Perplexity, Elicit, Consensus, and Semantic Scholar. And what we're asking you to do is select any one of these tools and enter the very same prompt. Well, once you've signed up for it or gotten access to it, enter the very same prompt in that tool and in order to get a new output, and then enter that output in the spreadsheet that we've set up. Just a bit of information about these tools before you do that. Bing is essentially Microsoft's sort of co-pilot chatbot. It generates both text and image responses and can also interpret images. And in fact, it did it quite well for me this morning. If you indicate creative or precise mode, apparently it runs on GPT-4, which is the most current and enhanced version of GPT. But it's available here in Bing for free, which you have access to as a Microsoft user through Rush's enhanced or enterprise version through your Microsoft account. These others are research tools. So Perplexity is a research tool. You will get text responses with citations. These aren't always accurate. There are some hallucinations, but it is free and no sign up is required for basic use. Elicit is a research and search assistant. So you can get, essentially good summaries of literature, depending on the prompt. It is peer reviewed. It does require sign up, but it does have limited use with a free account. Consensus is also a research and search assistant that is also peer reviewed. It provides links and snapshots, kind of little like synopses of studies cited. And there is a neat, nifty kind of export feature. So it's very useful for research in that regard. And then Semantic Scholar is one we wanted to include here because it's specifically focused on scientific literature. So if you are conducting a research study or if you're using it in your class and want to focus exclusively on research around scientific literature, this may be a good one to try. So as I said, if you wouldn't mind, select any one of these tools, get started creating your account, and enter that very same prompt in the tool. When you're ready, you can then copy and paste it. Here we have tool number 2, a space for you to enter tool number 2 in the spreadsheet, and for you to paste the response. This column for you to enter your tool selected and then paste your response or output to that tool in the column afterwards. It looks like you've all entered your response. Now, if you want to take some time to just compare the responses you got from both tools, and just sort of quietly reflect on their similarities and differences, then we'll chat about it. Has everyone had a chance to read both of their replies? Is anyone still looking? Let me know if so, and I don't want to rush anyone. Okay, I wanted to wrap the text so we can more easily see and compare them. Does anyone want to talk about their responses? I think I'll keep it here on the spreadsheet just so we can all take a look together, but we have a few questions for you that are posed on the following slide, but we'll just address them now. Generally, how well did this new tool respond to your query? In your opinion, how accurate was the response? Were the citations verifiable or appropriate? And in general, how would you compare the two outputs? Feel free to jump in your chat or use your mic to share. Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, depending on because you have a very different kind of prompt, right? And you're asking for a specific crafted message, right, to your students. So it may be useful more for sort of, idea generation, but maybe not necessarily to create a finished product. Any other thoughts? Hopefully you can all see my screen now. Please let me know. If not, I also backed it up. Okay, Emily, I think this is your slide.
Yeah. So I just wanted to pick up on some of the comments that you're all making. And I really love the different observations that you have about different tools and capabilities. And I think that's a great way to think about it. And one of my hopes is that if you try one tool and you find it disappointing, that maybe you reflect that that's not representative of every AI, that there are, I've lost count of how many AI tools are available right now. Last time I saw it was about 6,000, and that was quite a while ago. But that we want to keep in mind that different tools have different capabilities. For the time being, for better or for worse, depending on your perspective, there's also not a single free AI tool that really does everything. So some tools like Claude or ChatGPT might generate text really effectively, but they don't necessarily give accurate citations. Perplexity, on the other hand, we saw that it does generate beautiful citations, but I think you would be hard-pressed to write an essay with it unless you strung a lot of paragraphs together, and that might be kind of awkward. So I guess what I want to stress is that as you continue exploring AI, we encourage you not to limit yourself or your students to a single tool, and maybe keep experimenting to find the right tool for the job. One thing I do want to stress is that there are paid tools, most notably right now is ChatGPT 4, that has significantly enhanced capabilities. I would by no means tell anyone that they need to run out and get a ChatGPT 4 subscription, which actually right now you can't do anyway because they put those on hold. But we do want to be aware that for people that have those, that they have access to many advanced features that ChatGPT 3.5 users don't have, for example, or that Claude users don't have. So there are also some equity issues that we want to keep in mind when we're thinking about AI tools and capabilities.
I'll jump in here, and Emily, unless I'm mistaken, I believe that Bing, if used in creative or precise mode, and there are different modes you can select when you enter a prompt, uses ChatGPT 4 as its LLM. Is that correct?
It does use ChatGPT 4, and it has some of the same capabilities, but even Ethan Mollick, who's a lot of people follow for his expertise on generative AI, says that Bing is close, but the paid version is the best. If you want the best, then the capabilities just aren't quite the same.
Yeah, thanks.
Especially when it comes to things like data analysis.
Any other comments or questions before we move on and continue and jump into round 3 of our speed dating? Okay, so moving on to prompt engineering. So I think you'll discover as you continue, and some of you already have, right? As you continue to practice and play with these different tools, that you'll need to refine your prompting skills in order to get your desired output from the AI. This is commonly called prompt engineering or prompt design. And just for a brief definition from Technopedia, prompt engineering is a technique used in AI to optimize and fine-tune language models for particular tasks and desired outputs. It refers to the process of carefully constructing prompts or inputs for the AI models to enhance their performance on specific tasks. So as you engage in the practice of prompt engineering or prompt design, know that your response is really going to be only as good as the response is only going to be as good as the prompt you've entered. So experimentation and play through iterative prompting is really key toward understanding an AI's capabilities and selecting the right tool for the job. And also, I think it's important to remember that AI is not obviously it's not. People tend to approach AI conversationally by entering a query, but AI is not a person, right? So your query should be likely different than what you might type into a standard Google search. You'll likely find that you get better results when your prompt is more structured or not conversational, and you incorporate key characteristics. And I've included some of these characteristics here on this part of the fourth bullet point. You don't have to conform to this design or structure, but it can be helpful. And I've seen a lot of experts in the field keep coming back to these essential kind of components of a good, well-structured prompt. And that is defining the role, being specific about the task you'd like the AI to perform, setting the conditions for performing that task, and describing how to do it. So writing clearly, being specific, and that includes what you want and don't want from the tool. And you can say that outright, don't include, right? Providing context, considering your tone and the audience. And this is, again, a skill that's learned through, continued practice, right? And it's important, I think, as we get to know these things, to spend time with them so that we understand their full capabilities. So I wanted to provide you with an example. By no means do you have to conform to this, but if you recall, I entered that first prompt in Claude, what is backwards design and instructional design? So that's just a general question, right, that I might ask even if I entered it in Google. If I were to refine the prompt, by including some of these sort of key components of recommended on the last slide, I might word it as this. You are an undergraduate student studying education at a college or university. You are searching for introductory peer-reviewed books and articles on backwards design. These texts will be reviewed for potential use in an academic paper on instructional design approaches when teaching at the college level. List and summarize 10 foundational peer-reviewed resources on the topic. Provide full citations and links if applicable. So you see, I've defined the role, I've set the conditions in which I've described the task, set the conditions in which this task should be performed, and also ask the AI what I would like it to provide for me in return. There are other ways I could continue to refine and enhance this prompt, but you see it is much more prescriptive than just asking what backwards design is, right? So what we'd like you to do for this round 3, or going the extra mile now, is select one of the two tools that you previously used, because we want you to sort of see how refined prompts can enhance, right, your output. Apply prompt engineering skills insofar as you perceive them to refine a search. You may have to develop that through iterative prompting by asking new questions, and then copying and pasting your refined prompt in the spreadsheet along with the AI's response. So this requires a little bit more time, right? Because we're sort of reframing the query using some of these prompt engineering skills. And then we'll be talking about how well the AI responded to the query. So again, defining the role, being specific about the task, setting the conditions, and describing how to do it. Does anyone have any questions before we jump back into our spreadsheet and begin prompt engineering our previous prompts? Or if you want specific guidance too, and how to restructure, or even if you prefer not to refine, that's fine too. Suggestions for restructuring your prompt to get a different output. You may find that you just need to continue to have an engagement with the tool, right? Just by entering follow-up questions or asking for more specific responses based upon what it previously gave you. Here's my refine instructional design prompt, and in parentheses, I put the tool. And this is the response I got to the refined prompt. And again, you're to be selecting one of the previous tools you used for the first 2 rounds of speed dating. Okay. And you can feel free to also just verbally share your thoughts. You don't have to enter it in the, this was just designed to help facilitate the activity, but it's not required or anything. For the sake of time, I want to make sure Emily has some really important stuff to talk about after this. As you're doing that, I thought we might just sort of generally talk about the response that you got through your refined prompt, how you refined it, and whether or not the output you received provided you with any better of an output than you had with the initial prompt. Ben, or put in the chat. I'm sorry if you're still, so you feel like it spoke to its intended audience, or it used.
Yeah.
I hope that the more you play with it, hopefully the less terrified you'll be, and as you get it to work for you, for whatever your needs are, right? Yeah, I think at least in my, and maybe Emily, you want to comment on that. Generative AI tools can, what I forget who coined it, can appear confidently incorrect, right? So even if the source looks really good, you might find through some, especially depending on the tool that you're using, when we know that Perplexity has greater hallucinations, right? You know, further deep diving into those sources you may find that they are invented. And I did get that in response to my refined prompt, and even told the AI, this appears to be a made-up citation, and it apologized. It said, yes, it was. I'm so sorry. Here's one in its place. So, you know, you can continue through iterative prompting to correct it and get what you need. I mean, I hope you can see, all of you, how you might, you know, modify this for use in an activity with your students, right? For tasks pertaining to a topic related to your course, or you know, a fun icebreaker activity or something like that, where they can just begin to play with the tools and get a feel for their capabilities. But I don't want to take too much more time, because I know Emily still has some information to present. Does anyone have any other questions about these speed dating rounds, and or before we move on?
All right, so what I thought I'd do is we'll round up by talking about some recent AI advancements. I'm just going to highlight two of them in particular, and then we'll leave plenty of time for questions and opportunity to discuss the resources. So if you've been following AI, you may be aware that there have been just a huge number of advancements since the public release of ChatGPT 3 last November. These include an increased number of tools, some of which we experimented with today. Just last week, to much fanfare, Google announced the release of Gemini, which is going to be integrated into Bard, but it's going to have significant enhancements to the previous version of Bard, and experts say that it's going to be even better than ChatGPT 4. It's probably not there yet, but it may be. I put in the chat I think it's fun. It's a AI leaderboard, and it just talks about the different levels of hallucinations that different platforms have. And so we see that ChatGPT 4, for example, only has 3% level of hallucinations. Claude, which I'm a big fan of Claude, has more hallucinations than ChatGPT 4 3.5. Other advancements include built-in writing assistance in a number of platforms. So Google and Microsoft Copilot make it really easy for people to use AI to start writing or to keep writing. Other systems have a lot more recent data and browsing capabilities, and they vary from platform to platform. Tools like Claude, for example, you can actually input a tremendous amount of information. You can upload up to 5 PDFs. So if you weren't impressed by Claude, try putting it in 5 PDFs and asking them to summarize and synthesize it, and I think you might be impressed then. I think it's pretty cool. You can upload a variety of file types, and a number of tools are also coming out with voice features, so that instead of typing, you can speak your prompt. And for a brief window, ChatGPT did have a feature that it would also speak back to you. I don't know if that's been put on hold, but there are other platforms that have that sort of multimodal voice capability. And we can move to the next slide, and I'll talk about a different kind of multimodal capability. And what we're seeing is a demonstration from ChatGPT 4's Vision feature, in which I uploaded an image and asked ChatGPT to synthesize a diagram and help me understand it. And not being a STEM person, I was pretty impressed with its ability to look at this image of a yeast cell and tell me about the key parts of it and provide information. I think this is more and more where different platforms are heading, is having not only textual input, but also visual input. And I foresee a lot of exciting educational applications for this. And you can do this with Bing, by the way, as Laura alluded to earlier, but you can do things like get feedback on a slide for a PowerPoint or a poster presentation. You could get feedback on charts or data visualizations. Another use that I really like is generating alt text. So there's a lot of exciting uses for these multimodal inputs, and I really look forward to hearing what faculty start doing with it as well. All right, next slide, please. I think another place a lot of AIs are going is with the ability to allow users to create their own custom chatbots. There was a lot of hype around this in November when ChatGPT unrolled the ability for paid subscribers to create GPTs, also known as custom AI tools. And these are customized AI chatbots that can allow you to enter domain-specific training data and design it for specific uses. Now, I'm showing you Poe in contrast to GPT because Poe is actually free. This is a version created by an English and writing professor. I forget where she teaches, but is a custom chatbot that is designed to give students advice about writing, which I think is pretty exciting. And I think there are a lot of exciting possibilities for bringing in this level of customization and personalization to the classroom for faculty who are interested. We have a variety of resources, including, I want to point out, the library just put together a library guide of a variety of resources that come from City, as well as resources that they've generated themselves that I highly recommend that you may want to look at and share with your students as well. And then there's other select resources.
Yeah, I'm glad that we have several minutes so we can just chat freely. If you guys have questions or want to talk about any of these tools or, you know, what you think your next steps are with respect to generative AI, if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share about that. Any other questions or remarks or?
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. I just put in the chat, but I hope if you have any questions, you'll reach out. We have a variety of resources, and we're always happy to do one-on-one consultations if you need any assistance.